On this episode, I talk about budgeting on commissions, how to pay for pesky incidentals, and why the heck anyone would pay off a small balance loan with zero interest.
I go beyond the philosophy, and I give you real life application. I am Coach Nino Villa.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Ask Coach Nino Villa show. After a 1-week hiatus for the crazy election week, we are back on a regular schedule. I hope everything's getting back to normal for you as well. And let's jump right into this week's show.
Jay asks, what happens if you work on commission and don't have a clue how much will come in the next month?
Hey Jay, this is a great question. It's one that I get all the time. I work with a number of different people in a number of different industries. I work with people who might be waiting tables, and so they don't know how much they're going to make in tips every day, every week, every month. I work with people who are in real estate who they don't know, exactly how much they might make in commissions in a month. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who actually run their own businesses, and they can kind of maybe tell how much money they're going to be making each and every month, but it's still very uncertain. And so the very first thing that I try to do when I'm working with a client like this is I want to sit down and I want to get a sense of what's kind of normal, or what's worst case scenario, what are some of your averages. And so the first thing you need to kind of figure out is what's your worst month look like. If you get paid monthly, or if your commissions are paid out monthly, what's your worst month look like? If you're waiting tables or whatnot, what's your worst day look like, or possibly worst week? But you got to get worst case scenario. You have to kind of know, is it zero? Could you possibly have zero income in a month, or is that highly unlikely? And so, maybe you're talking a couple $1,000s, whatever that worst case scenario is. First, get worst case scenario. Then also start to look at averages. Yeah, sure, you might have your worst month might be $1,000, but your best month might be $10,000. And so, what is it really average? Are you averaging about $3,000 or $4,000 a month, or whatever that number is? And so, look at worst case scenario, then look at averages. And then what you need to do is you have to figure out, okay, what are my expenses every month? So what do I need to absolutely positively clear my expenses? And that's where we start to identify what your budget's going to be, and specifically what your income, what income you're going to pay yourself. Because if you're making commissions and they're fluctuating, you really shouldn't be spending all of your commissions in a single month. You should be holding on to some of those for future expenses. And so let me kind of take a step back and give you an example from some of the entrepreneurs that I work with. So there's a particular person that I work with. She runs her own business, sole proprietor, and also the sole income into her household. And so it was a matter of figuring out what's the worst case scenario, what's the average, what are some of those high months look like. But then more importantly, it was, well, what are your monthly expenses? On a personal level, the business is separate, and you've got to separate these two things out. If you're in real estate and you're working off of commissions, but you pay for your own marketing and different things like that, you got to separate out personal expenses and business expenses. So we first took a look at personal expenses. The personal expenses were averaging, because of course expenses can fluctuate, we're averaging less than $4,000 a month. And then there were some business expenses, which were pretty small in comparison, but focusing on the personal side of things, it was finding out what are the expenses, or how much do the expenses cost you every month, but what number do they not exceed? And in this case, it was they don't exceed $4,000. Okay, so now it was, well, how much are you making in the business? Well, sometimes I make $2,000, maybe sometimes this person makes $6,000 or $8,000, and when they're having a really good month, they can make $10,000 or $12,000. Okay, so here's what we need to do. We need to get on a typewritten budget, but we also need to pay ourselves a salary out of the business, instead of just bringing home every dollar from the business and then kind of figuring out what am I going to do with it. It's really important that you pay yourself a salary from the business. And even servers who wait tables can kind of do this. And you basically say, I'm going to pay myself X number of dollars a week. So in this particular entrepreneur's case, they're paying themselves $4,000 a month. They're going to pay themselves $1,000 a week. Every Friday, $1,000 without fail. Okay. Started off with enough money in the business to do this. So, making money as they were paying themselves the salary. So now every Friday, $1,000 comes home to take care of personal expenses. Anything that the business has above and beyond $1,000 goes into a savings account, or a fancy way of saying that is a retained earnings account. And so now you start to kind of just stockpile some savings into the business, so that when you get into a month where maybe you only make $2,000 from the business in the entire month, there were reserves that you can still continue to pay yourself $1,000 a week. So you build up that reserve so that when you have a hard month, you can pay yourself from that savings. So here's what happens over time. Over time, you're taking $4,000 out a month, but maybe you go 6 months, and for those 6 months, you're stellar. It's 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. Okay, so you have a surplus of $6,000 every single month. For 6 months, that's $36,000. Working your business long enough, if $36,000 is enough to kind of cover you for a couple of months if you had a couple hard months, or whatever the case may be. And so at that time, after 6 months or after 3 months, you could do it quarterly. You could do it twice a year. You could do it once a year. But look at that savings account for how much money is in the business based off of what you're paying yourself, and then say, okay, can I take a bonus? Can I take a quarterly bonus at this point? And so this particular individual is taking a $4,000 income, a salary every single week. It's $1,000, but every quarter or every 6 months is paying themselves a bonus of anywhere between like $5,000 and $15,000. And that'll help to get out of debt on the personal side of things. And of course, you also have to consider your business expenses if it's something that is part of your world. So that's a really big kind of example for somebody who's doing really, really well. Another quick example, if it's somebody who works for tips, so in the food industry, working for tips, if you know that your worst week is $300, well, then start paying yourself $300 a week as your salary. Like, that's what I get. And if I make anything more than $300, I'm going to put it into a savings account, aka a retained earnings account, and I'll pay myself a bonus later, so that you don't get so dependent on using up all of your income all of the time. And so try to figure out what the worst is, figure out what the averages are, and then start to determine what can you pay yourself as a salary each and every week. Pay yourself bi-weekly, however often you want to pay yourself, but get really consistent so that you can start to really predict what your income is going to be. Because even if you have a really great month, and like, I'm only going to pay myself $300, $800, $1,000 a week, your income becomes very predictable. And then when you have a bad week or a bad month, you have some reserves built up that you can kind of take from to cover, so that you can continue to have a very predictable income. And so, Jay, I hope that really helps. I hope that answers your question. If you continue to have questions about that, please feel free to continue to ask.
Samantha asks, I am wondering what category you pull from for, say, laundry, soap, cleaning supplies, new broom, and such, especially since it isn't food.
Okay, Samantha, so if you've ever checked out any of my budgeting videos, you may see that my wife and I have decided to break out kind of like the grocery fund into three specific funds. There's food. There's a food fund, so there's money that we put in an envelope every payday that is just for buying groceries at the grocery store, food that goes in our mouth. We have another line item for toiletries, and so we stuff another envelope full of cash just to pick up things like cleaning supplies, toilet paper, paper towels, all of those different things. And in that category would be things like light bulbs or garbage bags when it comes time. These things that happen a little less frequently, like maybe there's expenses every single month, like laundry soap, but it's not every single time that you go to the grocery store, so it kind of fluctuates. And so we have that second category, toiletries, is specifically for those types of items. And maybe we pick up paper towels and toilet paper every single trip to the grocery store. Probably not, but maybe you have some items that you're picking up every single time out of that category, but the majority of it is going to be things that you're not picking up every time. So salt for a water softening system, or like I said, trash bags, laundry soap, light bulbs. If we needed to buy a new broom, or vacuum bags, or just these things that kind of come up, definitely have an envelope for those things. Again, we just title it toiletries, but you can kind of put on in there anything you want, but definitely have an envelope that you're putting some amount of money into every payday. We've chosen $65. $65 every 2 weeks works out for us. And so we just put $65 in there, and we don't make it a habit of spending it all. If we don't have to, we spend what we need. And when the next payday comes up, if there's like $30 left, we put another 65 in there to give us 95, so that fund can kind of grow over time, and it can kind of cover some of those incidentals, those things that just kind of pop up every once in a while, so that you don't have to throw an extra line item that said, type in broom, or write broom $5, $10. Like, that's silliness. Just have a fund kind of for these incidentals. We call them toiletries, and they cover things like batteries, light bulbs, all this other stuff. And now that I'm thinking about it, for anybody who might be thinking, have a similar question about like car repairs, like knicky-knack things. Like, for instance, just the other day, I had to put a new tire on the car, just one. 3 of them were perfectly fine, and the other one was balding rapidly for whatever reason. And so we had to replace one of them. And so my wife and I actually have another fund similar to toiletries that just kind of covers light bulbs and batteries and all sorts of incidentals. We have another one specifically for the car. So if I need to change out the light bulbs, the headlights on the car, any light bulbs, window wipers, if I need a oil change or some other type of maintenance, we have a fund where it's called gasoline and maintenance. And so we spend we fill up, probably in a 2-week period, we probably fill up 2, maybe 3 times, spending about $20, $25 a time. So we know that we spend about $60 to $75 just in gasoline in a 2-week period. But we put $150 into this gasoline and maintenance fund. So what happens is, over time, that fund begins to build up. And when I need to go get an oil change, or if I need to replace a tire on the car, there's money to do that already, and it doesn't become an emergency, or and it doesn't become like another line item on the budget. It just comes from a very specific fund. So I hope that is a very practical approach to finding a way to pay for these things that just kind of come up over time. These nicky-nacky, nickel and dime you things that could blow up a budget if you're not thinking about them and you're not planning for them. So that's one way that you can plan for them, is have an envelope specifically for those incidentals. Feed that envelope every single pay period. Allow it to grow so that when you do need things, you have the money on hand.
Tammy asks, which should I pay on first? A bank loan that has $1.46 daily interest building up, or on a lower balance credit card with a 0% interest?
Okay, Tammy, so this is the $1 million question, right? Well, maybe not $1 million. You're not going to pay that much in interest, but it really is. There's just like a heated debate around, do you pay the smallest balance off first? Do you pay a loan with interest off first? And, there is no right or wrong answer. There's just different philosophies as to why. Why would you pay off a $500 credit card with a 0% interest before paying off a $3,000 loan that is accruing interest at $1.46 every single day? Like, why would you do that? Why not just take any extra money you have and put it at the $3,000 loan in order to pay that off and save yourself some of the interest? And so if you decide to go smallest balance first, the philosophy there is momentum. Sure, the math doesn't work in your favor, but for most of us, this is not a math issue. We know how the math works. It's a behavioral issue. We don't behave properly with money. And so we end up making foolish mistakes with our money, and we end up buying things before we can afford them, and all these different things, right? So it's behavioral. So if you go after the small $500 credit card with a zero interest rate, well, you're going to be able to pay off that $500 a lot quicker than you can $3,000. And so it stands to reason that if you paid it off, you would feel a sense of accomplishment. You would feel like, wow, I got one of these debts out of my life, and now you can turn and kind of focus on the next debt. And so that's the philosophy for pay off the smallest balance, regardless of interest rate, first. That's the reasoning. Now, the math suggests that yes, you should pay off things with a higher interest rate first so that you save yourself on the interest. And if you're talking about two things here, if you're talking about, let's say, going back to $500 credit card with 0% interest, or a $3,000 loan that's accruing interest at $1.46 a day, if you have the money to pay off one or the other, but not both, so let's say you have $3,000, I would encourage you pay off the $3,000. You have enough to pay it off, right? And so I wouldn't suggest paying off $500 and then only paying $2,500 on the other, keeping a $500 balance with an interest rate. So if you have enough money to pay off the larger loan right now, do it. But if you don't, you're probably going to want to take the philosophy of paying off the smallest balance first, so you feel a sense of accomplishment, you gain some momentum, and then you can turn your focus to one single debt instead of multiple debts and really go after it. So that's one way I would encourage you to pay the larger balance first with an interest rate, is if you have the money to pay off both. The other time I would encourage you to do that is if balances are really very similar. So if you have a $3,000 credit card, and right now it has a 0% interest rate, which of course will go away. But let's just say, for argument's sake, you had a $3,000 loan at 0% interest, and you had another $3,000 loan or similar, maybe $3,500, but it's really close in balance, and it has an interest rate of, say, 10, 12, 18%. Then when the balances are similar, I would also encourage you to go after the one with the interest rate, because it's going to take you about the same amount of time to pay off either one. And so why not pay the one off with the interest so that you can start to save yourself that interest? So absolutely. And so the school of thought for paying off the balance first, the lowest balance first, is momentum and behavior. The school of thought for paying off the one with the highest interest rate first is a mathematical one. Yes, you're going to save yourself the most money in the long run. However, you're not going to shave so much time and money off of the plan if you don't pay it first, right? You're not going to be in debt for years and years longer, or pay hundreds and thousands of dollars in interest by deciding to pay off a smaller balance first and then turning your focus on to the next one. So I hope that starts to help you understand why would you do it either one of the two ways. So what would Coach do? Well, when Coach started off on this program, and I started the Total Money Makeover with my wife, it was all about listing our debts from smallest to largest and working the debt snowball. So pay off the smallest one regardless of interest rate and roll it in. Now that we've been doing it for a while, and now that we're like smack dab in the middle of the student loans, and the student loans, all the balances are $2,000 or more at this point. So they're all pretty large balances. Now it's about doing it the mathematical way and saying, we have the discipline, we have built up the behavior, we have the discipline to pay off a larger loan that with a larger interest rate, rather than going after the smallest loan, because we want to save ourselves some of that interest money. And so what I would have done 3 years ago, smallest to largest, just starting off, do that. You're going to feel a sense of accomplishment. You're going to get some momentum. That's going to be great for you. If you've been doing this for a while, you're highly disciplined, and you can really attack debt multiple debts at one time if you need to, but while focusing on the highest interest rate, well, then do that. So there is no right or wrong answer, but hopefully that helps you to understand why you would do one and why you would do the other. Well, there you have it. It's episode number 3 of the Ask Coach Nino Villa show. I want to thank Jay, Samantha, and Tammy for submitting their questions this week. Continue to submit your questions and I'll answer them on an upcoming episode.